This is a quick video demonstrating how to copy labels between projects, use shared labels on SysRev, analyze that data, and just sharing a few techniques for different ways to reduce duplicate work in document review. So in this demo, we're going to use the test Echinococcus 2019 project. This is a public project created by Venka. If we look at the URL right here, we can see /p/11120 at the end of the URL. That tells us the ID of this project. It's right here. And let's move that back up. So we'll need to use that ID a little bit later. You don't need to memorize it. You'll be able to see it again. But let's just take a look at this project for a moment. We can see the project has 31 articles. It has one reviewer. That reviewer has reviewed all 31 articles. There was a screening task here. The reviewer had to include and exclude articles. It looks like she included 26 and excluded 5. And the reviewer extracted a lot of Boolean labels about Echinococcus from 31 articles. So she extracted information about cyst localization, body location, age, data determination, and so on. I don't know exactly what these labels mean, but I can tell a significant amount of work was done here to extract information about articles in the context of these labels. You could see other videos for, how the review process works, but just very briefly, if we take a look at one of these labels, let's take a look at just this top one, cyst localization data. If we click that button, we can see that Venka has reviewed a whole bunch of articles. If we look at these articles, we can see in this one, she said the article had cyst localization data, it had body location determination, and some other information. Excuse me. Okay, so just to recap, we have a project, test Echinococcus, 31 articles, one reviewer, 9 labels. Now, this is great. We have a completed project here. If we wanted to reuse some of this data in a new project, what we might do is just recreate the whole project and do it over again. And that would be terrible. That would be a lot of redundant work. What might be a little bit better is to look at the sources for this project. We could download this source and upload it into another project, but I'll show you a better way to do that. And we could look at the label definitions. So if we see the labels in this project, we might want to take some of these labels. We could do that one by one by clicking Share Label, taking that code, and importing that to a new project. That's a little bit slow, but we'll show you some tricks for doing that later. A way to do this that's a little bit faster is to just hit the clone button. So if we hit the clone button here, we're going to go ahead and clone this to Tom SysRev. And there you go. We have a new project. It has a new ID right here, 115689. And it has the same articles. You can see 31 articles. You can see right here the same RIS file in this project. Let's move that up a little bit more. And if we look at the label definitions, we see the same labels. So we see the include label from before, the cyst localization data, and a variety of other labels. Okay, so we have a clone of the project, but we don't have the bulk of the work done. Previously, we saw that if we go back to this clone project by clicking this link, we saw that Venka had extracted a whole lot of information. And in our clone, I'm going to hit the back button. We can see, we're in our clone now, we can see that none of these articles have been labeled. So I'm going to rename this clone, just something a little shorter. So we're going to call it Echino clone. Copy that name. Okay, so we have the clone. And now the question is, how can we get those user answers into this project? So it's going to be important to get the ID of this clone. And let's go ahead and look at some code. Okay, so SysRev supports a package called rSysrev, RSR. And RSR has a function called copy answers. Copy answers copies answers from one project into a new project. So when we had that original Echinococcus review, if we just take a look at some of the answers from that review, 111200, we can see we can get a table of answers and we can see there are 279 answers. We've got 8 columns here, and yeah, so we want to take all these answers and put them into the new project. Now, one thing to think about here is if we're going to copy answers from one project to a new project, we need to be sure that the same labels are in both projects. So how do we do that? Well, if we get the labels from this project, and I'm just going to create a variable that's a little bit faster, we're going to call that esr.pid. If we take the labels, there's a lot of label information there. Let's just call it esr.label. And we can select the short label, and we're going to select the global label ID. And you can see there's an ID here, and those are the same labels that we saw before. Just to put them in the same order, we could say arrange, we could say arrange by project ordering. And there you go. So we have include at the top, and we have global label ID. The global label ID is the label that's shared by all copies of this label. So we created a cloned project, and let's go ahead and call that cln.pid 115689. That was our clone project. And the question is, let's put that at the top. The question is, does our clone project, does it have the same labels? So cln.pid. And we're going to do the same thing here, except we'll put it over here. And so we have nicely arranged labels. We have short labels, and yeah, forgot to run that. Okay, so we have the cln.pid. This is the cloned project that we just created. And if we get the labels from that, let's clean this up a little bit. If we get the labels and take a look at those labels, we could see that those are the exact same labels that we had before. Let's drag this down a little bit so we can look at both labels at once. There we go. So just sort of taking it by eyeball, we could see B839A. Yep, looks like it's the same thing in each location. Okay, so because these projects have the same global label IDs, we know that we can import information from one project into the other project. The only other thing that these projects need to have in common is the articles. So if we're going to copy answers from one project to another project, we need to be pretty sure that the same articles exist in each project. So we'll call this clone.art and esr.art. So I'm calling the rsr function get articles. I'm calling it on esr.pid. Now there's a lot of information in here, and you could learn a lot more, but we're just going to look at AID and article data ID. I think that's it. So let's take a look at this new variable. This is a table. It has an article ID. Article IDs are IDs that are specific to the project. So we could actually go to sysrev.com. If we use rsr browse article, we can do esr.pid. Looks like that got messed up a bit over here. And we could do 138, whatever that is. We take that article, and if we run this, we'll open a window. And let's see if that showed up for you guys. Looks like it did. You can see this is an article in the original project, the test Echinococcus 2019 project. So this is a real article there. It's defined by the article ID. If we look at the URL, we can see that article ID is right here, 13897, so on. So we go back into R, you can see, yep, there's that article ID. We took a look. It definitely exists on sysrev.com, and it has an article data ID associated with it. So the article ID, the AID, that's specific to the project that we're looking at. The article data ID, that's a data identifier for the article. And that article data ID will be shared with all articles independent of what project they're in. So what that means is that if we get the articles from our cloned project, what we should see is that the article IDs, the AIDs, are new, but the article data IDs should be the same. And maybe the ordering won't be perfect here, but Yeah, looks like it isn't. So let's just, make this work perfectly and say esr.art percent arrange by article data ID. And if we take clone.art and arrange it by the same, there we go. So we could see the article data ID, it's equal in each project, but the article ID is different. So now we know that the two projects have the same article data IDs. They at least have some overlap of article data IDs. And in this case, they have a perfect overlap. And they have an overlap in the global label IDs. That's all we need to know to copy answers from one project to another. So let's go ahead and run the copy answers. We're going to use esr.pid as the source project and clone.pid as the target project. Now running this is going to take a little bit of time. rsr is a new package, and this is something that's going to get a lot faster. But this is going to take. Just need to update my token. Let me just pause and do that. Okay, I just updated my token. Looks like it didn't load it in. So now, that does show you that to run this function, you need to be an owner of the target project. You don't need to be an owner of the source project if it's a public project, but you do need to be an owner of the target project. So you can't just, copy answers from any source project to any target project, especially if you don't own that target. So let's go ahead and run this, and you can see, there we go. It's loading. It's going to take about a minute. So that's all you need to know really about shared articles and shared labels on rSysrev. But let's go ahead and take a look at some other things you might want to do with cloned projects. Let's take a look at our clone project again. So here we go. Yep, this is our Econo clone. And let's just make sure. Yep, that's it. So if we wanted to copy all the answers into this new project, we can see that they're copying in right now. About 24 have completed. Then what I just showed you works just fine. But sometimes you want to copy in some of the answers and not all of the answers. A good example of that would be maybe you don't want to copy in the include label, for example. Maybe you want to screen differently in this second project. So if you wanted to do that, you could detach that label, and you can see we got a label detached successfully. And now we have a detached include label. And all that means is that we can rerun that copy function now, and it wouldn't copy over the includes. So anytime we detach a function, that label will have a new global label ID. So let's take a look at how that works. So if we come back to the code, we can see that our import completed, and we're going to see what happened with the detached label that we just ran. So you'll recall that we had this esr.label and this clone.label. Let's go ahead and add a little space here and make this really simple. So esr.label, we run that again, just to remind you, it has short labels and global label IDs in it. Now, because we detached one of our global label IDs, we shouldn't expect a perfect overlap anymore. But I haven't run clone.label again. So these are the same labels we had before we detached the included label. So if we do esr.label, if we intersect that with clone.label, $global label ID, and we'll need the global label ID. If we run that, we get 9. There's an overlap of 9. So all of the labels in clone.label, and we do nrow clone.label, they're all copies of labels in esr.label. So they all share the same global label IDs. But now that we've detached a label, if we run this again, we can see, once again, we still have 9 labels. But if we run the intersect again, what you can see is we get an intersect of 8 labels. And you can see that this top one, which was the include label, B839, it's no longer present down here. So detaching labels is a nice way to, you can take a bunch of labels from a source project, and then if you want to detach some of them, you can do that. And then if you were to run copy answers again, or if you were to run copy answers maybe the first time with a detached label, you wouldn't get the detached answers copied over. So this is a little bit of detail, but just to sort of show you that there's a lot going on here. There's a whole lot of tricks you could use. Now, this is what you would do if you wanted to clone all of the labels from some sort of source project. But what if you had a lot of source projects and you wanted to take labels from, multiple source projects? Well, you could import labels into a project, and you can do that in code, or you could do it manually. So right now I'm going to show you how you would do that manually, and later we can, in another video, maybe show you how you would do it in code. So let's go ahead and create a new project. We're going to call this Econo Clone 2, or what was the last one named? 2? All right. Create that. We have a new project. Okay. So let's go ahead and import some articles into this project. So we're going to import the same RIS file that we had from the original Echinococcus project, but we're not going to do it with cloning this time. So we're going to take RIS, and now we have that RIS file uploaded. So let's go ahead and take a look at the project. We have 31 articles, but we only have one label. So we take a look at the labels. We have the default include label. So if we wanted to pull some more labels into this project, we could go back to our Echinococcus project. Let's go to sysrev.com/p/111200. There we are, back at the Echinococcus project. We can go to Manage, Label Definitions, and maybe we only really care about copying one of these labels. So let's go ahead and copy this one, the sys localization data. So now we have that on my clipboard. Go back to this project. We can go ahead and click Import Label, put that code in, and there we go. We have the sys localization data as a new label in this project. Now, the only label that this project has in common with the source project, the Echinococcus source, is this sys localization data. So if we go back to the code, we're going to have to take the project ID from this project. Let's call that. Okay, one second. Okay, so we're going to test how you would copy labels when you've imported a label into a new project. So we have imp.pid. That stands for import project ID. And we just got that project ID. It's 115697. And looks like a few projects got created in the last few moments. But yeah, so we have the import.project ID. This is the project ID. If we want to copy answers, then we can just run the copy answers function again. But first, let's just check and see what the overlap is between this new project. We're going to say imp.label. We're going to get the labels for imp.pid, and we're going to look at the global label IDs. So let's go ahead and run this. Oops. Okay. Imp.pid. We're going to get the labels, imp.label. There you see we have two labels in this project, and the second global label ID, this one, should be in the original Echinococcus sysrev, the esr.label project, so or esr.label table. So we do esr.label, %filter, and we say global label ID is equal to this global label ID. There you go. It shows up. But what won't show up is that include label. And also all the other 9 labels or 8 labels or whatever it was, they're not there either. So we can see we only have one label from the source project. So we can copy the answers from that source project into this target project. You could also use rsr review and write a little bit of code to do that yourself. Review just takes a project ID, an article ID, and so on for copying answers. But let's do it with copy answers. So we're going to write rsr copy answers, and what's the source? So the source is esr.pid, and what's the target? Well, that's going to be the import.pid, and let's go ahead and run that. There you go. So we're importing a subset of the answers from that source project, and this big list result that comes out just tells you, for each article ID, each label ID, what the status was of that import. So it looks like it worked. We go back to our project, Econo 2. Maybe I couldn't name that to Econo import. That seems fine. If we take a look at the overview, throw a refresh on this, we can see none of the include labels have been completed, and that's because the source project didn't have includes for this target project. But 31 articles have been reviewed. And so if we look at syslocalization, we can see, sure enough, the syslocalization is there. So those are some tips and tricks for copying answers between projects. A little bit of a tutorial about global label IDs and article data IDs. And I hope that's helpful for when you think about reducing redundancy in review. Thank you.